She boarded Flight 447 like any other passenger. No special seat, no carry-on, nothing remarkable. But when 4 terrorists took control at 35,000 feet, something changed in her eyes. The captain saw it first. This wasn't fear. This was recognition. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, consider subscribing for more tales of extraordinary courage under impossible circumstances. Captain David Martinez adjusted his headset as Flight 4047 prepared for departure from JFK International. At 42, he had logged over 15,000 flight hours and prided himself on reading passengers and situations with the precision of a seasoned professional. Today felt different, though he couldn't quite place why. The manifest showed 203 passengers and 8 crew members bound for London Heathrow. A routine red-eye flight that would cross the Atlantic during the quiet hours when most passengers slept. Martinez completed his pre-flight checklist with methodical precision, his weathered hands moving across familiar control. In the cabin, passengers settled into their seats with the usual mixture of excitement and resignation. Business travelers typed furiously on laptops, families organized children in carry-ons, and solo travelers claimed armrests with territorial determination. Sarah Chen occupied seat 14C, a middle seat she had specifically requested during booking. Her appearance was deliberately unremarkable. Navy slacks, white blouse, minimal jewelry. She carried no purse, no carry-on bag. Nothing that would require security screening or draw attention. Her boarding pass listed her occupation as consultant, a vague enough title to invite no further questions. As passengers filed past her row, Sarah's eyes moved with practiced efficiency. The nervous businessman in 12A, checking his phone obsessively. The elderly couple in 16B, helping each other with seatbelts. The young mother in 15D, trying to quiet a fussing infant. Normal people on a normal flight, or so it appeared. Flight attendant Michelle Rodriguez made her way down the aisle, offering assistance with overhead compartments and answering passenger questions. Her smile was genuine but tired. This was her 3rd flight in 2 days. She paused at Sarah's row, noting the woman's calm demeanor. "Can I get you anything before takeoff?" Michelle asked. "I'm fine, thank you," Sarah replied, her voice soft but clear. No accent, no regional markers, perfectly neutral American English. Captain Martinez's voice crackled over the intercom as the aircraft pushed back from the gate. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've received clearance for departure and expect a smooth flight to London Heathrow. Current weather shows favorable conditions with an estimated flight time of 7 hours and 15 minutes. As Flight 447 climbed through 10,000 feet, the cabin lights dimmed and passengers began settling in for the long journey. Sarah appeared to doze, but her breathing remained controlled and her posture alert. Every few minutes her eyes would open slightly, scanning the cabin before closing again. 2 hours into the flight, most passengers had fallen asleep or were absorbed in entertainment systems. The cabin was quiet except for the constant hum of engines and the occasional crying child. Sarah had been watching 4 specific passengers since boarding, their behavior patterns setting them apart from genuine travelers. The man in 8F had gone to the lavatory 3 times but never used it, instead making brief eye contact with specific individuals before returning to his seat. The woman in 22A had ordered no refreshments and kept checking her watch against the bulkhead clock, her timing too precise to be casual. 2 men in different sections, 18C and 31F, had both declined meal service and maintained postures that suggested military training despite their casual civilian clothes. At 35,000 feet over the North Atlantic, the coordinated attack began. The man from 18C rose from his seat with fluid precision, no longer the relaxed tourist he had pretended to be. From beneath his seat cushion, he retrieved a ceramic blade that had bypassed metal detectors. His movement was practiced, professional, lethal. "Nobody move," he shouted in accented English, grabbing the nearest flight attendant and pressing the blade to her throat. The cabin erupted in screams and chaos as passengers registered the threat. Children began crying. Adults shouted in multiple languages, and the controlled environment of commercial aviation dissolved into primal fear. The other three operatives revealed themselves simultaneously. The woman from 22A produced a similar weapon and moved toward the cockpit. The men from 8F and 31F took positions that gave them control over different sections of the aircraft, herding passengers with precision that spoke of extensive planning. In the cockpit, Captain Martinez heard the commotion through the secure door. His training kicked in immediately as he activated emergency protocols. "James, get me air traffic control," he ordered his co-pilot. "We have a security situation. Tower, this is Flight 47. We are declaring an emergency. Mayday, Mayday, we have a hijacking in progress." The lead hijacker, the man from 18C, dragged the flight attendant toward the front of the aircraft. "Pilot, you will open this door, or passengers will die." Martinez switched to the cabin intercom, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "This is the captain. Everyone remain calm and follow instructions. Do not resist." Through the cockpit's security cameras, Martinez surveyed the cabin. What he saw chilled him. 4 armed individuals with military precision, passengers cowering in terror, and flight attendants being used as human shield. But in the midst of all this chaos, one passenger remained perfectly still. Sarah Chen sat in 14C with her hands folded calmly in her lap. While everyone around her screamed or wept or pleaded, she maintained an expression of focused concentration. Her eyes were open now, moving systematically across the cabin, cataloging positions, distances, angles. "My God," Martinez whispered to his co-pilot. "Look at 14C. James Wilson adjusted the camera feed. "She's not panicking like the others." "She's not panicking at all," Martinez corrected. "That's not shock. That's assessment." The lead hijacker began separating passengers by nationality, a tactic designed to maximize psychological pressure. Americans on the left, Europeans on the right, others in the center. Families were split apart, increasing the emotional stakes. "Your government has been contacted," the hijacker announced. "Comply with our demands and no one dies. Resist, and blood will be on their hands." Sarah allowed herself to be directed to the American section, without protest. As she moved, she stumbled slightly, an uncharacteristic moment of clumsiness that brought her closer to one of the hijackers. For just an instant, their eyes met. Martinez, watching through the cameras, saw something extraordinary happen. The hijacker's confident expression flickered, not with recognition, but with uncertainty. Whatever he saw in Sarah's eyes had momentarily shaken his composure. The woman hijacker from 22A approached the cockpit door with a device that appeared to be some kind of override mechanism. "Open this door, or we begin executing passengers," she demanded. Martinez had no choice. Lives depended on his compliance, but opening the cockpit would give the hijackers complete control of the aircraft. He reached for the door controls with a heavy heart. That's when Sarah Chen moved. Her actions were so swift that Martinez almost missed them despite watching directly. In one fluid motion, she grabbed a heavy safety manual from the seat pocket and struck the nearest hijacker's wrist, causing him to drop his weapon. Before he could react, she had swept his legs and driven her elbow into a precise point on his neck. He collapsed unconsciously. The violence was clinical, efficient, and utterly silent. The other passengers in her section were too terrified to immediately process what had happened, but the remaining hijackers noticed immediately. The woman at the cockpit door spun around, abandoning her position to deal with the unexpected threat. Sarah was already moving to her second target, the hijacker from 31F, who had been controlling the rear section of the aircraft. Her approach was methodical, using the aircraft's narrow aisle to limit his ability to maneuver. When he raised his weapon, she trapped his arm against the overhead compartment and used leverage to snap his wrist with an audible crack. The cabin's screaming intensified, but now it mixed with confusion. Passengers weren't sure if this new violence was helping or making things worse. The lead hijacker released his hostage and moved toward Sarah, his ceramic blade gleaming under the cabin light. He was larger, stronger, and armed. But Sarah had advantages he couldn't see. 20 years of training in situations exactly like this. She feinted left, then dropped low, sweeping his legs while simultaneously deflecting his knife hand upward. As he fell, she caught his wrist and applied pressure to a nerve cluster that forced him to release the weapon. A quick strike to his solar plexus left him gasping and disabled. The fourth hijacker, the woman who had been attempting to breach the cockpit, now faced Sarah across the narrow aisle. Unlike the men, she showed no surprise at this turn of events. Her stance shifted into a combat position that suggested extensive training. "Who are you?" she hissed in Arabic, then switched to English. "Who sent you?" Sarah didn't respond verbally. Instead, she picked up one of the dropped ceramic blades, testing its weight and balance with professional appreciation. When she looked up, her expression had changed completely. Gone was the mild-mannered passenger. In her place stood something else entirely. The two women circled each other in the limited space, each recognizing a fellow professional. The other passengers pressed back against the windows, instinctively creating a combat zone. In the cockpit, Martinez watched in amazement. "Who is she?" he whispered. The female hijacker lunged first, her attack swift and precise. Sarah deflected the blade and countered with an elbow strike that the woman barely avoided. They exchanged a series of lightning-fast moves, each testing the other's skill and reaction time. Sarah ended the fight by using the aircraft's curved ceiling to her advantage. She drove her opponent upward into the overhead compartments, then used a pressure point technique to render her unconscious before she could fall. 4 hijackers, neutralized in less than 3 minutes. The cabin fell into stunned silence except for the continuing cries of frightened children. Sarah straightened her blouse, smoothed her hair, and walked calmly to the intercom phone. "Captain Martinez," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the stat. "This is Agent Sarah Chen, Central Intelligence Agency. The threat has been neutralized. You may resume normal flight operations." Martinez stared at the security monitor, seeing this unremarkable passenger who had just single-handedly saved everyone aboard. "Agent Chen, how were you tracking these individuals?" "Negative, Captain. I was traveling on unrelated business. But these weren't random terrorists. They were professionals. Probably state-sponsored. Their coordination was too precise for amateur extremists." Flight attendant Michelle Rodriguez approached Sarah cautiously. "Ma'am, are you really CIA?" Sarah zip-tied the unconscious hijackers using emergency restraints from the medical kit. "Many things, but right now I'm just another passenger who wants to get to London safely." Captain Martinez's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. The security situation has been resolved thanks to the extraordinary actions of a fellow passenger. We will be continuing to London Heathrow as scheduled. Flight attendants, please check on passenger welfare and assist anyone who needs medical attention." As the cabin slowly returned to normal, passengers began approaching Sarah with mixtures of gratitude, curiosity, and awe. She deflected their questions politely but firmly, returning to her seat as if nothing unusual had happened. A businessman from first class approached. "That was incredible. Where did you learn to fight like that?" Sarah looked up from the safety card she was reading. "I took a self-defense class once." The understatement was so absurd that several nearby passengers laughed despite their recent terror. The tension began to break as people realized they were safe. An elderly woman patted Sarah's shoulder. "Dear, that was no self-defense class." Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time since boarding. "You're right, but some stories are better left untold." Captain Martinez left the cockpit to personally thank her. Up close, he could see the professional assessment in her eyes, the way she continued to monitor exits and potential threats even while appearing relaxed. "Agent Chen, I don't know how to thank you. You saved everyone on this aircraft. Just doing my job, Captain. Though technically I was off duty." Martinez shook his head in amazement. What were the odds? A CIA operative just happening to be on the same flight as professional hijackers. Sarah's expression grew serious. "Captain, in my experience there are very few coincidences in this business. These weren't random terrorists looking to make a statement. They had specific training, sophisticated weapons, and detailed knowledge of aircraft security systems." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this was a targeted operation. They knew this flight, this route, these security protocols. Someone gave them inside information." The implications of her words settled over Martinez like a cold weight. You think there's a larger conspiracy? I think we need to have a very detailed conversation with authorities when we land. And I think you should request emergency clearance to land at the nearest secure facility rather than continuing to London." Martinez nodded grimly. "I'll contact air traffic control immediately." As Flight 4047 changed course toward a military airfield in Scotland, Sarah returned to her seat and pulled out a secure satellite phone that hadn't been there before. Her conversation was brief and coded, but passengers near her caught fragments. "Package delivered. 4 subjects subted. Recommend full debrief upon landing." "Yes, sir. It appears to be part of a larger operation." The young mother who had been struggling with her infant earlier approached tentatively. "I wanted to thank you. My baby, my husband and I. We owe you our lives." Sarah looked at the family, her professional facade softening. "What are their names?" "This is Emma," the woman said, holding her daughter, "and my husband David." "Beautiful family," Sarah said, gently touching the baby's hand. "That's why I do what I do, so families like yours can travel safely." As the aircraft descended toward the military airfield, passengers began to grasp the magnitude of what had been averted. Not just a hijacking, but potentially a coordinated attack that could have killed everyone aboard and possibly been used as a weapon against other targets. The elderly businessman from 12A approached Sarah as they prepared for landing. "I've been flying for 40 years, and I've never seen anything like what you did. How do you stay so calm?" Sarah adjusted her seatbelt and looked out the window at the Scottish countryside below. "Training helps, but mostly, I remember that fear is a luxury I can't afford when other people's lives depend on my actions." "Do you ever get scared?" For the first time, Sarah's answer came without the careful neutrality she had maintained throughout the flight. "Every time. The difference is that I've learned to use fear as fuel instead of letting it paralyze me." As Flight 47 touched down at the military facility, emergency vehicles and security personnel surrounded the aircraft. Sarah had briefed Captain Martinez on the protocols that would follow: interviews, debriefings, evidence collection, and likely several days of investigation before passengers would be allowed to continue their journeys. "Agent Chen," Martinez said as they prepared to disembark, "I have to ask, was this really a coincidence? You being on this particular flight?" Sarah gathered her minimal belongings and smiled enigmatically. "Captain, in 20 years of intelligence work, I've learned that sometimes the universe has a sense of timing, whether you call it coincidence, fate, or just being in the right place at the right time. I'm grateful it worked out this way. Will we see you again? Probably not. People in my line of work tend to fade into the background once the excitement is over. But if you're ever on a flight and you see a passenger who's a little too calm, a little too aware, just remember, sometimes the most ordinary-looking people are anything but ordinary." As passengers filed off the aircraft, many stopped to thank Sarah or shake her hand. She accepted their gratitude graciously, but remained focused on the task ahead. The hijacking was over, but the investigation was just beginning. The 4 hijackers were removed from the aircraft in restraints, still unconscious from Sarah's precise application of pressure point technique. Each would be processed through secure intelligence channels, their identities analyzed, their connections traced, their plans unraveled. Captain Martinez watched from the cockpit as Sarah was escorted away by military personnel. She moved with the same unremarkable efficiency she had displayed while boarding 12 hours earlier. To anyone not knowing what had happened, she would appear to be just another passenger dealing with an unexpected delay. 6 months later, Martinez received a brief unsigned note through official airline channels. "Thank you for your professionalism during the incident. All threats neutralized. Travel safely." A fellow professional, he kept the note in his flight manual as a reminder that heroes often walk among us, unrecognized, unremarked and unassuming until the moment when ordinary becomes extraordinary and lives hang in the balance. The official report classified the incident as a security event, successfully resolved through passenger intervention. The details remained classified, the passenger's identity protected, and the larger conspiracy that had been uncovered continued to be investigated by agencies that didn't officially exist. But on flight 103 passengers and 8 crew members had learned that sometimes salvation comes not from expected sources, but from the quiet person sitting in the middle seat who boards like any other passenger with no special seat, no carry-on, nothing remarkable until the moment when everything depends on exactly how remarkable they truly are. From which city in the world are you watching this today? If stories like this inspire you, consider subscribing for more tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when it matters most.